We're missing part of the story between last week's gospel and this one. And that's unfortunate because it's a very important part of the story. It's only 3 verses, but in these 3 verses, between the story of the rich young man last week and this story we heard today, is the 3rd prediction of Jesus' death. Remember, after the first prediction, Peter rebuked Jesus for speaking like that. After the second time, the disciples were talking among themselves about who was the greatest. And this time, in response to Jesus saying again, "I'm going to suffer and die, but rise again on the 3rd day," James and John find this courage to ask for seats of power on his left and on his right. As is true of most things, this is not a story without context. Jesus has been preaching his death consistently to his disciples for the 3rd time now, and they're still more worried about who will have what position. And don't be tempted to think that the other disciples are without fault here. The other 10 became indignant at the brothers we just heard. And it's because, I think, their feelings were hurt because they wanted that same power. Because immediately after Jesus told them that those positions were not his to give, they got upset. I contend, if Jesus had given those positions to James and John, the other disciples would have been running to Jesus to see what position they could have gotten. But in response to their indignation, Jesus tells them what real leadership looks like. If you want to be great, be the slave of all. Jesus isn't a fool. In our piety, we might look at someone jockeying for a position, maybe even in the church, and think harshly of them. But maybe it's worth asking myself, why am I so worried about what somebody else is looking for? I'm supposed to be content with being the slave of all. So who cares if someone else is looking for power and glory? I often hear that the best bishops are the ones who weren't looking for that role. Or better yet, did not want the job in the first place. That's how you can tell if somebody's going to be a good bishop. So to those of you who have taken up roles in your families or in our parish because there was a need, and not to boost your pride, thank you. Thank you for being docile enough to be a servant when you felt called to help. Never let your position over someone else let you be a dictator. And if you need a way to humble yourself, this parish still has tons of other opportunities for you if you want to take Jesus' words seriously. For the casino night, for instance, that'll happen the first weekend in December, they're still looking for volunteers to help with any number of things. There's a group preparing for a young adult conference we're having for the first time ever, the first weekend in November, and they need support. Youth 2000 will happen again this January, and we need a massive amount of servants to help with any number of tasks, since this event can host as many as 800 young people. We're going to have altar server training tomorrow. Maybe you heard that in the announcements. So all of you who are considering serving the Lord at the altar, that would be a great help and an aid. Do I need to say more? Well, I'm going to say one more thing. Read the bulletin. Because stuff like this is happening around here all the time. How is Jesus calling you to be a servant in a new way, as he gave himself as a ransom for many?